Hey guys, it's Claire.
And Don.
And we are the Ormewoods. We are documenting our gardening journey this year every Sunday with garden tours. That's what you're watching. Thanks for being here. And gosh, it's mid to late August.
I know.
It feels like we just started.
I know. It's weird. It's like the season's kind of winding down and I feel like we haven't even kind of got cranking yet. It's bizarre.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. You know, we are a folk rock duo that really turned our attention to gardening last year when we were not gigging and had a lot of free time and quarantine. We are now starting to gear up for gigs. In fact, our first gig for any of you that are local is September 10th at the Atlanta Zoo. And it's a fundraiser for the Grant Park Conservancy. That's the nonprofit organization that takes care of Grant Park. So if you're local, check that out. We have tickets below. But I tell you all that background just to say part of why we've been documenting our channel this year was to inspire other people who may not have an agricultural background, like neither one of us.
Yeah.
Like we grew up in the suburbs. You know, my grandparents had a small little plot, but I mean, we didn't spend a lot of time homesteading, right? We were kind of city people. I'm definitely a city person. So it's been really fun to explore this, and we just kind of want to inspire those of you that are maybe newer, to show you what you could also do. So let's just check in, like what's worked for you this year and what's not working.
Well, I kind of, like I said, when we were off camera, I enjoyed having more bed space, kind of expanding the garden in that way, but it was also a challenge because it was like a lot more to deal with, more than I kind of thought it would be. I thought it would just be like little extra work, but it's basically like double the work.
Yeah, so our lot is an acre, and we're not growing on the full acre by any means. We're probably growing on 1/3 of it.
Yeah.
And we did double the size of our growing space for this growing season, and it has felt like an immense amount of work.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like for those of you that have kids, when you have one kid, it's one thing, but then when you have like two kids, it's like astronomically more. That's what this feels like the weed pressure, the pest pressure, just being able to kind of keep up.
The trellising killed me this year.
Yeah, so if you are thinking about trellising or wanting to know more about trellising, this is probably a good video for us just to focus on that for them. Last year we had this metal material that we used. It's kind of like cattle panel, not quite.
Yeah, it's stuff that you can get at like a big box store. It's basically to put in concrete, like sidewalks and pads and stuff to reinforce the concrete, but you can get it easily locally. So I just got it at Lowe's and put this up on stakes, and it works just like cattle panel. It's not quite as tall. Cattle panel is I think 12 feet and this is 8 feet. But it was easy to get, and I could get it home. I can't get cattle panel home in my truck, so it worked good. And what I learned this year is that I really should have used that everywhere instead of trying to use. I used this netting stuff with some just old tomato stakes that I had from last season, and it worked great when the plants were about this tall and about this tall, and when they got to be about 5 feet, they got really heavy, and all my trellising is kind of now collapsing. So to be fair for anyone that's out there thinking about trellising, a couple of things happened for us this year on the new beds. We had a moment where we could have gone ahead and set up trellises and then planted. And we chose not to. We chose to go ahead and plant the beds. And then we would wait until something got big enough. Well, we went on vacation, and in that week that we were at Hilton Head, everything grew way more than we thought. Yeah.
So we started off the trellising a little bit behind where the plants were already big enough and needing to get trained. I think in hindsight, if we could have trellised from the beginning.
Yeah, I think next spring, I think we should just set every bed up with trellis and then let them grow.
And this kind of trellis.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that happened when we went on vacation is the tomato plants grew like around each other.
Yeah.
And so then it was kind of hard to separate them, or we were afraid to separate them. So anyways, we have an earlier video that's called like enjoying the wildness of my garden or something like that. If I can find it, I'll put a link for you. But I really kind of was enjoying just watching the plants go wild, but now that it's like almost late August and everything's wild,
yeah,
I feel like it's a little bit out of control.
Out of control. It's hard to deal with.
It's hard
to harvest.
Yeah, so I think the trellising gain this year. The other thing is last year we had, like with the wooden stakes he's talking about, we had one tomato plant trained at that one stake. Well, now we're growing way more. We've got over 40 tomato plants in the ground, which I know for some of you is not a lot, but that's way more than what we had last year. And, you know, we're having those little stakes carry the weight of this trellis, and then we've got like 8 plants with fruit on them, which are really heavy. You know, when you get a 10, 12 foot plant with covered in almost full-size tomatoes.
Yeah, it gets up there in weight, and I just didn't really account for that when I put this.
So before we get to the back beds and show you some of the trellising that's been a problem, I also just want to point out one of the things that's not working, at least for me, is just the overall look of the garden this year. I think that because we expanded it and because we had a lot of success last year with really just how pretty the garden looked, that I was fully expecting to like up level from where we were. And a lot of things just didn't pan out for us in a way that's really affected the way the garden looks. And we look out at this garden from our kitchen windows, so we see it a lot. And so it's always just kind of like, So for example, this is cucumber plants. This is a tomato plant that just took a little bit longer to get started. In fact, this needs to get trellised. And then behind me over here is a Kahari melon. And you can just see the pest damage, all the rain, the blight. I mean, the idea was for these trellises to be covered, which they were last year, and it was beautiful. But this is like the best they've looked, and that doesn't really look all that attractive. So I think something for me to really take into account as we're planning the fall garden and then for next summer is really making sure the aesthetics are in play, because not having them in play this year has been something that's weighed on me a lot more than I would have thought. Well, for you beginning tomato people, if you go to the big box stores, you see these tomato cages. You can see this one's about to fall over, this one's about to fall over. And this one is cherry tomatoes, this one is regular tomatoes. Now granted, for the most part, we grow indeterminate, so they get bigger. They keep growing and growing and growing. These cages, though, just aren't great. I wouldn't waste your money on them. We used them just because we had them. But honestly, they're better for peppers. And they just don't really have the height that you need for tomatoes. Now, maybe that's different if you're growing a determinate. I don't know. My friends that grow determinate say they don't work for them either. So that's, something you might be able to leave us a comment about if you have success with these kind of cages. But like I said, we're just using these because we needed something. But again, this is another side that could have been trellised. So this one's even worse. This one, you can see the stakes just were not strong enough to support the weight of the plants. And I'm guessing there was some wind involved as well. Like, we've had a lot of storms. I don't think these just toppled over on their own. But when you couple the weight of the plants with all the rain and the storms that we've had, which we have had a ton, now it's going like this. And of course, again, this right here, if I just were to show you, that's how much this is. And we just lost a fruit. So at least I wasn't able. So this one has a little bit of blush. And there's nothing wrong with green tomatoes. There's a lot you can do with them. But I do like my red tomatoes right now. So this is a trellis system that if we could, yeah, it failed. This is an example of, whereas in the other beds we had that panel and nothing was growing, here we have no panel for an archway and yet it's growing everywhere. So if we had this paneled up like we do in the other bed, it would probably be a really pretty archway, but instead it's like something you have to walk through, which I have a lot of allergies. That's not always the most fun thing. It's difficult to harvest stuff when you're having to reach in and everything's complicated and tangled. So I think definitely trellising this year got the better of us. And overall, I'm really impressed with how much fruit we're getting and what we are producing, but I think it would be a more pleasant experience, and I think it would look nicer if we had managed our trellising game better. So let us know what your thoughts are. What are your experiences with trellising materials? What questions do you have? Dawn does all the building construction stuff, and maybe you have a question for him that you'd like him to answer, leave us a comment and let us know. And for those of you that are subscribers, thank you so much. We really appreciate all the time you spend with us, and we have so much fun making these videos, and we hope that you're learning things. And if you're not a subscriber, please consider clicking that subscribe button so that you can keep up with our garden tours every Sunday. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.